I deliberately took a long walk up because I really like that track. Just so you know. I'm going to start off with a story because I think it's quite relevant. I know you guys have been here for 3 days and the music is meant to sort of re-energise you before you all take your journeys home. That song is quite fitting for today in terms of the lyrics, the content. I'm going to go through it. I'm going to dissect it. It was 19 years ago that song first came out. Do you all remember the original? I've got this thing with my daughter. She loves music, and she's 19 years old as well. And when we're in the car, or if she's at home, she'll send me a text saying, "Have you heard this track?" And I always fall into the same trap when she talks to me. She'll say, "Dad, have you heard this?" And she'll play it, a snippet. And I'll go to respond, and automatically, I don't know if it's a competitive nature, but I'll just say to her, "Of course I've heard it. I remember the..." And it just reminds you how old you've become, all right? And then that look that she gives me, and the word that she says is like, "Damn." And that interprets to, whilst you look all right, you should actually be sat in a museum, you know? It's quite interesting. That song, in 19 years, has racked up 388 million streams. It's a lot of success. What you heard just then was a snippet of a remix. It's just been digitally remastered for 2025. It always makes me think, when a song is re-released, the perfection that they go through in terms of timing of when to release it so that they secure the older audience and the newer audience all at the same time. It's quite clever. That song, here's a question for you. If they remixed it and re-edited it and put it out every 3 to 6 months, how bored would you become? Yeah? Leaving it 19 years is a genius plan. The speed at which things are moving at the moment and why this is relevant is because it reminds me of policing. Sometimes it feels as though plans, policies, or things that we implement are always based on the foundation of something that previously worked. And the frequency is too frequent because the people that remember from the old time or the original times quickly hold you to account. Because it doesn't feel as though anything is changing. You've re-released the same material. I can't work out if that's because there's a safety element to it, because it's tried and tested, or maybe you're change resistant. You just don't want to embrace anything new. But it feels like, to the external people, like the community reference group, you talk to people within general members of the public, family members, they'll all tell you it just feels a bit samey. Whilst they don't have access to the detail where there has been change, it's the perception that's probably the most important thing. And the perception at the moment isn't great. The artist. My concerns are, if they had re-released that song, apart from boredom, they'd become obsolete, wouldn't they? Because they'd lose your credibility. You'd think they're not innovative anymore. And it's almost like that new word, cancelled. You wouldn't exist anymore. Policing can go down the same route if we're not careful. Credibility is our trust and confidence. Losing your fan base is losing the community. Policing's a tough gig at the moment, as you guys all know. Every day there's something in the paper, 3 or 4 articles at a time, social media in terms of streaming, what's being listed. If you dare congratulate yourself for a task well done, you're always held to account about what if, when are you going to do? There's never really much praise. And that includes from government bodies as well, not just the members of the public. I was looking quite recently in terms of, I was trying to research how many officers there are globally. I couldn't find the stats for it, but it adds up to millions. But what I did find if you work out on a basis of 100,000 inhabitants across globally, they've equated it to around 300 to 400 police officers per 100,000. The reason I'm highlighting that, it just takes one officer incident, regardless of location, for the reverberations to be felt globally, all because you happen to wear the same uniform, which is quite harsh, but it's also relatable. The Community Reference Group holds over 300 people across the UK, all individually picked. It's got civil society groups, faith groups, grassroots, your professionals like barristers, consultants. It's got a whole mix of people. And whilst it's quite hard to make them agree on certain things, there is one thing that they do have in common. It's in relation to the reports that have been provided over the years. The Scarman Report, 1981. McPherson Report, 1999. The Casey Report, 2023. All very similar findings, different terminology, but at the same time, lots of recommendations, some of which are still waiting to be implemented 44 years later. So you can see why they're challenged on hope, and that's why it's so hard to keep people focused. I read something quite recently, and I'm conscious of my surroundings in terms of you guys that are in the room being always evidence-based. And it's about the urgency of why we need to change things and start adapting to how things are materialising in the UK. It gave me some stats that I'm going to quote, and there's probably a bit of humour involved with this as well. But it made me laugh, but it also made me reflect. So it was saying if you're 20 today, and this is based on an average age expectancy of lasting until 80 years old, and 52 weekends being in a year. If you're 20 today, you've got circa 2,900 weekends left. If you're 30, you've got 2,400. If you're 40, I'm not 40, you've got 1,900. If you're 50, you've got 1,350. If you're 60, you've got 800. And if you're 70, don't buy any green bananas. That shows you the level of urgency. While it's quite funny, we haven't really got much time left. And it always brings me back to that thought process where officers run up to me and say, your background's recruitment. I've only got 4 years left. You need to stop counting down. Yeah, because time is upon us. I've seen personally the difference that it can make in terms of PrAP being implemented by having one officer who's been given autonomy to make a difference. If you look at the NPCC website, it will state, the Police Race Action Plan is the biggest coordinated effort ever across every police force in England and Wales to improve trust and confidence in policing amongst black communities. If you dig down, there's only a handful of forces that have actually got resource dedicated to delivering the plan. That's not deliberate, that's financial restrictions. It's not an easy piece of work to deliver or implement, but the practices that are requested or required are. I'll go back to that song again, and I won't sing it. One day you may have to answer to the children, the young people. If you're a parent, a grandparent, an uncle, an aunt, if you've got younger siblings, if you're a carer, or if you generally just care about young people, can you put your hands up for me? I'm going to interpret that show of hands as you being involved in the legacy that we need to create to make a better future for the younger people. And I'm also going to state that collectively we are now accountable to making sure those changes happen. My home force, Detective Chief Superintendent Sean White, is somebody that I work quite closely with on PrAP, and he's been given the autonomy to go and deliver the plan. And thankfully, he also thinks outside of the box. And it's all based on vision and resilience. To give you an idea of what's been achieved so far, the first thing that we did was arrange with some of the universities to look at AI being introduced as a solution into looking at our software so that there's no bias. That's something that we're working on at the moment. We've been to numerous universities across the UK and schools to speak to them about the Police Race Action Plan. We've carried out podcasts to make people aware. One of the most recent exercises that I did, which ties in with the well-being presentation that was given just previously, I addressed the new intakes, over 200 of them, to make sure that they were culturally fit and comfortable with addressing different people before they actually go out into the force. And they all had between 5 to 22 weeks service amongst them. And they are apprehensive because they're coming from that same generation that will actually put a phone in their face to record them when they're trying to speak to someone or engage with someone for the first time. And it's interesting, when I spoke to them, the majority of the people in that room were first generation. They weren't copying the paths of their parents. They were first generation officers. That's quite telling, because what I discovered from that was a lot of them had resistance to joining policing, regardless of race. Their families weren't supportive, but they also weren't being listened to at work. Because of their rank structure, they didn't feel comfortable with speaking. The problem with that is where you get retention issues, because they're not always as resilient as we would have been when we were younger. If it's not working and they don't have an outlet in terms of at home, because they weren't encouraged to join in the first place, and at work because they don't have the senior people to speak to, you leave. It's quite interesting also the ideas that they came up with when they were given a safe space to talk. Speaking of which, something that we did quite recently as well, Stuart Lawrence, who's here today as my special guest, we asked him to come into Kent Police, and it was an auditorium like this, and we filled it with as many officers as we could. It was a private space for officers and police staff to ask Stuart whatever they wanted, without anything being deemed silly, without being judged, regardless of any of your superiors being there. And it was around a 90-minute session. It was really informative. And the feedback that I got from it, the theme, I'm not sure what you're doing, but it feels different. When it comes to policies, I'll take that as a win. The thing with policies, they have to be read. And policing policies are quite extensive, and not everyone has time to read them. We've heard today about how much duties you have, how many responsibilities you have. If you're not personally affected by something that's about to be implemented, it might slip down your pipeline of things that you need to prioritise and look at. But by taking PrEP on a different journey and making it relatable and providing reasons as to why equity and equality and representation are important, you can start to take people on a journey. And the journey approach is a much more powerful route than simply providing you some documentation, because it provides you with understanding. And understanding is probably what's missing. This isn't a policing problem. It's a multi-agency problem, which is why Kent has also involved the local authorities, the schools, other emergency services. The problem doesn't just start here, it's widespread. It requires engagement from all. It requires responsibility from all. But it's very easy to point the finger at policing. I've invited Stuart here today because I think who else could we speak to give you a clear vision in terms of what he feels would be beneficial to policing. His family has been through an episode and still continues to go through an episode to this very day in terms of what we're trying to discuss here. And I think it's quite important, please come up, Stuart, that we get his thoughts and maybe even give you that safe space where you can ask some questions that you may have answers that you want answers to. So I'll bring Stuart up and we'll have a chat. Can you hear? Yeah.
Yes, I do have a mic.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, to provide you with some context, it's a year on Friday that Stuart and I were both nominated and we won awards for being Global Legendary Leaders of the Decade on behalf of the University of East London. It was something that was given to us by the High Commissioner of Jamaica. And I went up and gave a presentation about voids I'd identified in terms of young people lacking in opportunity, which led to me building an initiative that actually launched just on the 12th of September. And it's basically to get disadvantaged people back into work, back into full-time education. It's the return of safe spaces after school. It's mentoring, it's apprenticeship schemes, and it's a 10-year platform. It's partnered by some of the largest organisations, people like the UN, who are part of it. We've got the Barack Obama Foundation looking into it. Some real heavyweights, the criminal courts, making progress. And Stuart was sat there and heard, and I think he was quite moved by it. Yeah. And we had a conversation, and we agreed to work together from that day onwards. So Stuart now sits on the board. It's called Hope 360, or H360, 360 Degrees of Hope. Look out for it, because eventually it will also provide pipelines of young people into policing for intakes nationally. That's one of the main requirements. But going back to you, Stuart, in terms of family, what your family has been through, and your thoughts on policing in general and what you think needs to be changed. Really interested in your input.
Yeah, thank you, Cole. So for me, first of all, and first and foremost, I always say to people, it's each and every person inside this room's collective effort is going to make the most amount of change. The person I use most for that example is Clive Driscoll. And he always says, and I always say to people now, over all these years, Clive is a personal friend of mine now. So Christmases, birthdays, he comes and watches my son plays football, the whole shebang. He's a personal friend of mine. And he always asks me to remind people, especially that work in the police force, that work for most public bodies, to say, look, no one's asking anyone out there to be a magician and perform magic tricks. But what we are asking everyone to do is just to do the basics well. And if we start from that small point there, just doing the basics well, whatever you've been asked to do, whatever your role responsibilities, just doing that well, where do we end up? And as far as he's concerned, we end up in places where we do have positive results. We can move things forward. We can make a difference. But again, it takes everyone consciously making those small steps forward in all the roles and responsibilities that they have. And that may be a lot for some people. It may be more simpler for others. But in my heart, I hope that with people with that mindset, with that attitude, with that outlook, things will progress and go forward. Things will be better. Because I do not want anyone to experience what I've experienced over the last 30 plus years. And the crux of it all is the not knowing, or knowing but not being sure of. You know, the thing I like to share with people about my brother's case was that we found out in 2011, 2012, that there were 4 different incidences of someone saying what had happened from 4 different sources. The day after my brother died, I went to school. By lunchtime, I had a list of 6 names. That evening, someone came to our house, posted through our letterbox, a piece of paper with 4 of the 6 names on. Someone else was brave enough to pick up the hotline phone and to leave the same 6 names. And then one other person went into an actual police station and handed in a note with 4 names on it as well. Now, most people would say that's an open and shut case, like that's really going to help us progress this case forward in a real quick and meaningful manner. But it didn't happen like that. We had to wait nearly 20 years for part justice for 2 of the boys to be put away. And that's the bit that always will stand with me and stay with me, because now as a parent myself, I totally get it. Like, my son's the most precious thing in my life. The reason why I wake up in the morning, the reason why I do everything I do is for my son. And to be at that point of where you're just about to tip over, where you're saying, okay, go out into the world, it's all up to you now. I've done the best I can. What are you going to do next? At that crucial point, he was cut down, taken from us. And for me, like I always say, dreadful things are going to happen. Bad people are going to do bad stuff. But in the notion that we have the police, we have emergency services that are then supposed to be the safety blanket that we never want to use, and never want to have to call upon. And at that time when we called upon that safety blanket, it wasn't there for us. And that was just down to a small few things. And one of them is being the colour of my skin. And for me, that's such a hard concept to get my head around. That the colour of my skin can make other people make decisions of not doing the right thing. And I'm hopeful that, in all the years that have gone past now, and someone asked me that question the other day, if it was to happen today, Stuart, would you have a different outcome? And deep down, I hope that we would do, because again, CCTV cameras, there's a lot more video footage camera of things. And if something like that happened, most people would have pulled their phones out and recorded the incident straight away. But if we take away those elements, would the service be able to do the job it was supposed to do and be the safety blanket that I needed then? Sometimes I really have to scratch my head and squint my eyes and think, I don't really know. Don't really know. But of the word of the day, hope, I have this in my heart constantly. I hope that it would be a positive outcome. I hope that anyone else who goes through something like that does have a positive outcome. But that's all I can have really in these days. It's just hope.
On that alone, I'm going to leave it with a call for action. And the call for action is for you to support the plan as much as you can. It's to bring your true self into work every day and do little things that you think that can make a difference. It's not about having authority. There's little things that you can do that can make impact. Do your utmost. Gain some understanding. If you haven't read the plan yet, reach out. It's not too late. Your localised plans are still being formed. Share a voice, be a part of it, and let's see what progress we can make. I feel really bad that I walked up to a song that I then dissected to kind of use against you. Right? So I'm going to leave with a song as well that has no subliminal endings. It's just something I'm enjoying at the moment, and I'd like you to enjoy it as we go. Thank you for your time.